When it comes to everything fantasy football, you have to ask one question. Don't you deserve a fighting chance? And now, welcome to Fighting Chance Live with your hosts, Kevin Tompkins and Scott Fishbowl 9 winner, Gary Haddow.
Welcome in, everybody, to a special Saturday edition of Fighting Chance Live. And you know what they say? Elton John said it. Saturday night's all right for fighting. I'm sorry.
Fantastic. I love it. I love it.
Damn right. And we got Gary Haddow, of course. How you doing, Gary?
I'm doing fantastic. It's wonderful to be here on a Saturday. Get some downtime before the show and not have to deal with work. So it's always a good time to pot on the weekend.
It's truly magical. And that's pretty damn good. I'm not even gonna lie.
They're good.
That's fantastic. That's better than White Claw.
No.
But yeah, we've got Steve Rapin here from Fighting Chance Fantasy. Steve, you've been with us before, but how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. And what the hell is a White Claw?
Oh,
you
I've
kidding
never
me?
heard of those things before.
Oh,
I haven't
Steve.
jumped on the bandwagon. I have not jumped on the bandwagon of those. What are they called? Sparkling drinks or seltzer drinks or whatever they're called. So I'll stick with my Jack. And tonight it's not Coke. Tonight it's I know it's a regional drink, but Squirt soda, which is a grapefruit soda. I'll stick with my Jack Daniels for now.
I did not know that Squirt's regional. I just thought that was a thing.
I thought it was too, but I told our good friend Ryan Hallam that before, and he's like, "I've never heard of Squirt before."
He's
So-
just an old man. He has no idea.
I think so. Hey, I'm older than him, so I don't know if you should be saying that, Gary.
Oops.
We have Squirt. I've always heard of that. I don't know if that's regional. I thought that was just what it was. It's a thing.
We'll just say that he just doesn't know his soda culture. We'll say that, and that's probably a good thing with as unhealthy as it is. But you know what? Sometimes it's nice to mix something with a little bit of whiskey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love my gin. Give me Tanqueray all day long. But you know what, Gary and other people got me hooked on those seltzers. I used to be like you, Steve, where I was like, these White Claws, what the hell are these? So, you know, now that I'm drinking them, I love them. You got to try it. At least try it.
You know, the funny part is just yesterday, our kids, she doesn't babysit our kids anymore. They're older, but she just had a knee surgery and she's recovered, and her husband was doing something yesterday. So she come and hung out at our house yesterday. And I was at the store and I'm like, "Hey, is there anything that you want me to pick you up while I'm here?" And she goes, "Could you give me some White Claws?" So I have some black cherry White Claws in the fridge right now. Maybe if there's a little break in the show, we know how Gary likes to ramble on sometimes. If he's on one of his long rants or something, I'll just walk to the fridge and go get one and try one during the show.
You bastard. You bastard.
That's funny. Well, we are here today. We talked with Anthony Servino from the Face-Off about running backs 1 through 12, and we're going to be talking about a lot more running backs today to help fill out those rosters, pretty much the RB2s, RB3s, because there's a lot to sort out, right, Gary?
There is a lot to sort out. It's really interesting with this group. So just for anybody, just a quick recap. So we kind of discussed about 15 backs last week. So Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Ezekiel Elliott, Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, Kenyon Drake, Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, Austin Eckler, Nick Chubb, Miles Sanders, Leonard Fournette, Aaron Jones, Josh Jacobs, and Todd Gurley. That's kind of where we left it off. And so we have this next group, and something just kind of, we'll come back to this, but it's really interesting looking at the differences between the groups. That first group really seems to be a lot of, you know, bell cow backs, workhorse for the most part, even though they might, you know, get spelled a little bit. Whereas this next group, there's just a lot of different questions that you kind of have to keep in mind when you're thinking about who you're going to be going for your RB2, RB3 in this range. You know, are they rookies versus veterans? Do they have injury history versus not? Touchdown upside versus PPR? And then a really big thing is, are you going for the offense or are you going just for pure touches? You know, there will be some teams where you're going to have a bell cow back, but they're on a crappy team, or some that are going to have less touches, but they're going to be on killer offenses. So all of this kind of just keeping in mind as we're talking about this, and I'm sure we'll be addressing each of those, you know, some of those points as we go through everybody.
Yeah. For sure. Absolutely. And so let's get to the first running back. We're gonna get right into it. We're gonna start off with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Now, let's just start off with this. Running back, by virtue of its name, is a back who runs the ball. Let's just end the show there. That's pretty much all.
We'll see you guys next week.
Yep, it's been fun. It's been great. No, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I mean, let's be realistic. We don't know the exact split of how that's going to shake out in Kansas City, though. You know, they were in the first round. They took him with the 32nd pick. He's slated for a big workload. We know what he did at LSU with his receiving work. Steve, do you have any trepidation taking Clyde Edwards-Helaire if you were, say, at the 101 or 102, it was coming back to you in the second round to take a guy like him? Or are you going to try to go for someone maybe more established whose role is more defined?
You know, here's the way that I look at it, and Gary did a good job of saying that you have to, in this range of running backs, you have to pair opportunity along with skill. I think a lot of people would say that the skill is there and it's a great fit for him in this system. So it comes down to opportunity. And I think it depends on how many touches you think this guy will get. Last year, Kansas City was down toward the bottom of the league in rush attempts. They had 375 rush attempts, and let's just go with the top two. Damian Williams had 111. LaShawn McCoy had 101. So to me, the floor is going to be that 100 to 110. Now, they didn't draft him this high for a reason. And look, Damian Williams to me is just a guy. He's not a guy that's going to be, I think, a feature back in the NFL for long. I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to get 170 plus rushing attempts. I think he's going to be a bulk. You see a bulk of the work in the passing game. I have no problems right now with my projections. I have him roughly with 175 to 180 rushing attempts, 800 yards, 6 touchdowns, 40 receptions, 300 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That would give him 198 points, and that would have put him at running back 19 in PPR leagues last year. But I think that's his floor. I do. I really love this guy's talent. I love the fit. Andy Reid, since 2004, his running back one has finished as a top 12 running back in the league for 11 out of 16 seasons. So I think Helaire will be that running back one in a system that's likely to finish. I don't know if he'll quite finish as a running back one, but I think he'll be close.
So I have 2 questions then from what you just said, because that last stat is kind of probably the most important one. And that's if he takes over this, even if he's, you know, I always want to say 60, 70%, but like that, not a lot of backs are even at 70% nowadays. It seems to me that 19 is potentially even kind of low, you know, if relative to the whole top 12 thing. And so I think a lot of people will draft him based off of kind of the top 12 idea. I've seen him go as early as like 8 or 9, running back 8 or 9. And do you think you will actually draft him as your RB19? I know, I mean, we'll get there, but you actually have in front of him, you have Chris Carson, Melvin Gordon, and James Conner. Would you actually take those 3 players over Edwards-Helaire?
Yes. And this is where it gets into that risky range, because each of those guys has a little bit of risk. Carson's coming off a hip injury. Connor, we know his injury history. Gordon is, you know, we know that they have Phillip Lindsay on that there. So to me, Edwards-Helaire might be the most talented in the best system, but he's the biggest unknown. And so I would say there's a chance I would. If I'm looking for upside, there's a chance that I would. But as of right now, no, I would put those other guys just slightly ahead of them and probably draft those other guys first.
Yeah, it's about weighing that unknown versus the injury risk. So, you know, while every back in this kind of tier and the next couple tiers, obviously, if there were no questions, we'd be taking them in the first round. Yeah. But so that's, you know, that's where you've really got to weigh that worth.
Well, let me ask you guys this, quick over and under, and we'll start with Kevin and then Gary. I have, let's just say, 175 rushing attempts, not touches, just rushing attempts. Over, under 175 for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Kevin?
Under, but not by much.
Okay.
I'd say he's probably good about 150 to 160.
Okay. Gary?
Yeah, I mean, 170 to 180. So, like, I thought 175 is kind of the push mark that I would have agreed on to. I would have asked it the same way. To me, it's the receptions. I actually think, because of Damian, it's so difficult. But the 40 receptions sounded low. The difficulty is because how many is Damian going to get? I mean, it's hard to stat Damian for anything less than 20 receptions, I would think.
I was thinking the same thing because he had 30 last year. So I can see him going a little bit less. What shocked me was I was taking a peek at Pro Football Focus and their projections. They only have him projected at 11 receptions. That surprises me. Damian Williams. No, they have, what do they have? I don't think I have it handy what they have for Edwards-Helaire. And so, but yeah, they only had Damian Williams for 11, which kind of shocked me a little bit. I think he's up closer to that 20 as well.
I would be very curious, and unfortunately, I don't have this in front of me. How many receptions McCoy and Darrell Williams and Darwin Thompson all combined for? Because, obviously that third back does get some run or some targets and whatnot. I just, if you think so, I'm looking at McCoy last year with Kansas City had 28, and he was the 2. So he had 30 on his own, and that was with Damian out, I guess, a couple weeks Damian was out, if I remember correctly. So, yeah.
Darrell had 15 and Darwin had 9 receptions.
73 targets outside of Damian Williams with Sherman and Darwin Thompson, all those guys combined, and Spencer Ware when he got that couple games of run. So, yeah, it's a pretty sizable amount. I could definitely see him eclipse that.
And that was with a bunch of just guys, right? Like no one stood out there. And so now I could imagine 50 plus catches, not just targets, 50 plus catches for Edwards-Helaire, and still Damian getting 30. You have a 1-2 punch there. You don't need to rotate those other guys in, of course, barring injury. But I think Damian showed pretty well, especially on his routes. He's so much better on his routes than between the tackles. And if Edwards-Helaire can be better between the tackles, I think he's, again, he's going to be the one. I think we all know that. It's just a matter of if it's 1A, 1B, or 1 and 2.
And I would think both are going to see time together too,
yeah.
Because Damian will certainly be in there to his pass protection too. They're not drafting CEH to pass protect. That's for damn sure.
Yeah.
So. Last season they ran 11 personnel 60% of the time on their offensive plays, and so. I think there is an opportunity for them to kind of go that 21 personnel a little bit more this season as well. So I would expect an increase in that 2-back system as well.
God, their offense is going to be so awesome. It's just like, it's the only time I've ever been like, yeah, I actually would take a QB early is Mahomes. I wouldn't even take Lamar. I'd actually take Mahomes. I just think he's going to be lights out.
And when he
repeat of 2018.
And when he runs too, how many white boxes he's going to see?
Yeah. It's crazy.
Like that's insane. Just thinking about that, there, obvious respect for Mahomes. That passing game is just going to open up everything for him. Right now, CEH is basically Austin Eckler last year with that's unknown.
Yeah.
Right now, with the rushing attempts would be pretty much the same. You're expecting all those catches. And in the best offensive environment in the NFL. I mean that's the ups. That is the 2020 upside for CEH.
That's intense.
Yep. So let's go. We'll stay in the West, but we'll flip to the NFC with Chris Carson, who, at least for me, is one of my favorite values. Because if he didn't get hurt, if he didn't have the hip fracture, he'd be straddling that RB12. He'd be certainly in the second round conversation. So as far as it goes, Gary, we know Rashad Penny. He's got his ACL that he might not start the season. If you go wide receiver quarterback, are you comfortable with him as your RB1? If you were in the third round, if you went that start, as kind of your anchor, even with that injury history?
Yeah, I've actually, I've been doing quite a few of these drafts. I haven't been redrafted in best ball, and so it's a little bit different. But I've thought a lot about Carson as my number one, and I am comfortable with him because of the guys that come right behind him. I assume if I'm taking Carson that I'm as my RB1, I'm going straight back to getting a running back as quickly as I can. And kind of the next group of guys that we're going to talk about, I think, can be really solid anchors. Carson is, to me, just the volume. He is going to get 250 plus touches. There's no penny anymore. I mean, hell, they brought in Carlos Hyde. They drafted DJ Dallas. I don't have too much faith in either of those guys. It's come out saying it's Carson's job. And the offense is just going to get better and better. I mean, I've effused my love for DK Metcalf many times on various podcasts, including this, and just I'm all about it. I'm terrified of the Seattle offense. I just give them so much respect, and I think Carson has just shown like he is gonna just keep running it and running it and running it, and his target counts have been going up and up the last couple of years. And if he can continue to have a solid couple catches per game, if not more than that, I think he will finish between RB8 and RB14, somewhere in that range, assuming that he played 16.
Yeah, absolutely. He was RB12 last year. Where are you at on Carson, Steve?
I'm the same. I mean, in 15 games last year, he was running back 12. In 14 games in 28, he was running back 15. So even that say, so-called floor, running back 15, missing a couple games, if he misses a couple games, he could still literally finish that close borderline running back 1. Penny is likely to start the season on the PUP, so I don't think Hyde is a threat to Carson. I think he's just more that backup running back. The last 2 seasons, he's averaged 247 rushing attempts. Not average. He's had 247 rush attempts, 278. 5th in rushing attempts last year. The guy can find the end zone as well. He was 7th in rushing touchdown, 5th in rushing yards. Seattle runs the ball a lot. I love him. I really don't have any problems. The only scare is, of course, the fumbles. He's had 9 fumbles the last 2 years, so you do worry about that a little bit. But I think he's still, to echo Gary's point, if it's a 3rd round and I went wide receiver quarterback or wide receiver, I'd feel more than happy to have Carson as my running back 1.
Something that I do want to add, and this will kind of encapsulate as we go on to some of these other backs, especially like Raheem Mostert, who I love, is I don't know how to adjust my rankings for this. The NFC West they're going to be a beast of a division. The defenses on all 4 of those teams are awesome. And if you're the Seahawks, you have to go up against the Niners twice, the Rams twice, and now the Cardinals, who should have a much better defense. They're not going to be the sieve that they were before by getting Isaiah. God, I can't even think what his name is right now. Isaiah Simmons. Thank you. And so I think that I'm super excited for all these guys, and I'm going to be terrified anytime it's a division game.
The same token, though, I will say this. Look, last season, Arizona in week 4, 22 carries, 104 yards. Yes, I know they're better. The Rams, week 5, 27 carries, 118 yards. San Francisco in week 10, 25 carries, 89 yards, and a touchdown. The Rams in week 14, 15 for 70. I mean, he still put up some pretty good numbers against some good defenses there. So, yes, you do have to worry about the matchups a little bit, but I think the volume kind of helps offset that, and all it takes is a touchdown to kind of make up for that, few less extra rushing yards.
Yeah, he really has a high floor, and that's why I like Carson so much, especially if you're going to take him as that RB1.
Absolutely.
Yeah. As long as he's healthy, I mean, he's a set and forget RB2 you can pretty much depend on. I don't, the fumbles aside, and the hip fracture, we'll see if he can just be, if he's 100% when the season starts. But there's, in this tier, there's really not a lot of running backs you can kind of hang your hat on, like Chris Carson. So I know Gary mentioned him. Let's just go right to Raheem Mostert, because look at him, he's smiling. If you can't see him,
love him.
If you can't see him, he's beaming from ear to ear right now, getting ready to wax poetic on Raheem Mostert.
I've never heard of this guy before, so maybe Gary should. No, I'm just teasing.
Well, if you haven't, Gary's going to talk about him right now. He's bursting at the seams. He just wants to go all in right now. So,
he's a journeyman.
Yeah,
he's a journeyman, right? Like that's like the weirdest thing about him is that people. I mean, he's 28. He's never really done much, but he's also never been able to get into the system. He's kind of always just been, whether he's gotten injured or whatnot. He was on the Bucks, for anybody that doesn't know, and then he was on the Niners. Anybody that's a fantasy footballer fan knows Colonel Mustard. That's what his nickname was in 2018. And he's always had like a really good yards per carry. He's always shown really well. He's really good on special teams. So we know he's always going to be active. Anyway, now moving into 2019, it wasn't until the second half of the season where he finally got the, not the start because Shanahan for some reason kept giving it to Coleman, but he became the primary back, with at 15 plus carries or 12 plus carries in multiple games, getting some targets. Most importantly are his touchdowns. And he ended up having, I believe, 11 touchdowns, 8 on the ground, 3 in the air, if I remember correctly, or 9 on the ground, 2 in the air. And then the playoffs happened, and he obliterated the Packers, and he had 4 touchdowns for 238 yards, like setting a divisional round record. And then the next game, against the Vikings, he had been sick, and so I think he got cramps. He was dehydrated, but he was on a pace. He was 5 for 30 at that point, so he was on a 6-yard carry. And then he continued to do well the last couple of games. He got a touchdown, but whatever. So if they are going to give him just the same amount of carries as they did in the second half of the season, obviously there's an outlier game where he had 20 plus against the Packers, but everything else, he's getting into double digits. He's getting some targets. I would expect that he is a lock, an absolute lock for double-digit touchdowns. I'm so excited. If you haven't ever watched him run, just watch him. He is just awesome at running. Plus, then you get the offense, the scheme. I'm totally biased, right? I love the Niners. Aside from that, I genuinely believe that they are going to be one of those teams like the Chiefs and like the Ravens where they are going to be able to do stuff now that Shanahan finally has the pieces he wants. And he is an offensive genius, regardless of what anybody wants to say about fourth quarters and stuff. He is awesome. He can scheme the shit out of people. They drafted Brandon Ayuk. They're getting Hurd back. They're getting Trent Taylor back. They already have Kittle. They have Debo. The number one thing that some people say about Mostert is he going to get the touches? Coleman's just a guy. I don't think he's anything that special. As an RB3, he's probably better than your team's RB3. But to me, he's not that special. Mostert's way better. Jerick McKinnon is the other one. Finally, we're getting Jerick McKinnon back healthy. He's going to be their pass-catching back, which is fine. I'm totally comfortable with that because Mostert is so damn good on the ground. And so I don't see a world in which he's going to lose enough touches to drop himself. I have him at 17 because it's disrespectful to put him in the top 15 because of some of the other names. But realistically, he is going to finish again in that 8 to 14 range because of the amount of touchdowns. So many people are like, no, that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Just watch. This offense is going to be so damn good. I'm so excited.
Well, after that was beautiful, by the way, Gary, how the soliloquy from you.
He was going to go get beer, but he didn't know if he had time.
But so myself and Steve both have him on the RB2 fringe. I have him at 23. Steve has him at 24, and I'll go down to Steve. And do you have any rebuttal for Gary as far as Raheem Mostert for 2020?
Yes and no. I don't dislike Mostert. I think I am a little bit more concerned, like Gary said, about the touches, whereas he's not as concerned. To me, one of the hardest things to predict is touchdowns. Now, I agree, Coleman and McKinnon are not necessarily the ideal touchdown guys. I don't feel necessarily as comfortable with double-digit touchdowns as he does, but Shanahan kind of has this history of well, let's just say this. I talked about the coaching situation earlier with Edwards-Helaire. Shanahan, in 12 seasons as a head coach or an offensive coach, his number one running back in those 12 years finished as a top 12 running back 5 times, but then there wasn't anything from that top 12 to 22, and 22 or lower, they finished 7 times. So if you had to ask me, would Raheem Mostert have more likely to finish in the top 12 or finish 22 or lower, I guess I would have to say 22 or lower. McKinnon restructured his contract this year. He's making less than $1 million base, but he's got in-game bonuses of $250,000 per game, which to me, he's going to make every effort to be in the system as he can to play. They brought him in on a big contract, so they like him, even though they restructured it now, but he just hasn't been healthy. He obviously likes Tevin Coleman because he brought him in from Atlanta with him when he came. So I just am a little bit more worried than Gary that he's going to get the touches needed to finish as that top running back in the say the top 15 to 17 range.
Like Coleman and Breida were both healthy last year when Mostert started getting these carries, and they continued. In terms of the 12-year data with Shanny, how many of those teams went to the Super Bowl? One.
I think the Falcons did once.
And that team was Freeman and Coleman, where they had a strong, healthy split with Freeman taking the bulk. I get the concern about it, but he looks like an elite runner in the NFL. He looks awesome. And I think that is it's obviously scheme plus the runner rather than the runner plus some of the scheme. Because he's 28. You don't all of a sudden become that damn good of a runner magically overnight. So I get it. When it comes to referring to the Carson thing, like if I could get Carson as my RB1 and Mostert as my RB2, I'd be so pumped. If I had to have Mostert as my RB1, I would probably be more concerned solely because there's so much more up in the air. You don't have the security that Carson has in terms of touches and whatnot. But as an RB2 that has the sky's the limit, it feels like I love him in that spot. And if you can get him as an RB3, which definitely happens depending on your leagues, oh my God, that's amazing value.
If we're talking about like personal draft strategies, so I mean, a lot of people who know me, they know I've been going RB, and with that, I'm probably not going to get a chance at Mostert, and when I do, I'm probably taking the value at wide receiver versus Mostert in the 4th if he slips down to the 5th. But in that Shanahan system where they use multiple backs, I would much rather take Tevin Coleman 5 rounds later, get maybe the few games that he ends up, being an RB2 if I have to use him, and then be done with him. Dwayne McFarland has been talking a lot about that on The Hustle and on Establish the Run about, Tevin Coleman and the kind of parallel between the Mostert and Coleman taking the later back, later, like same with Singletary and Zach Moss, kind of getting that value later, but still getting a piece of that running back by committee. So while I do like Mostert, I just, from a value standpoint, I'm probably not, I'm going to be out on him. But, touchdowns are volatile. The touches, I'm not sure where they're going to be. And that's probably that uncertainty that's going to is the main crux of why I'm out.
And you do make a good point that Breida was there, so you're basically substituting Breida with McKinnon. So I do understand that. So it just is a little bit of and I guess a lot of these situations have a lot of question marks as well. But man, 3 guys kind of scares me a little bit.
I will talk at length about McKinnon on future shows, but when it comes to Coleman specifically, I will say he was brought in after McKinnon. And McKinnon was brought in to be the guy and Coleman to be the secondary. But now you have Mostert and you have McKinnon being the secondary guy. And Coleman, I think, is kind of on the outs. I think they're keeping him around just to make sure because, they're such a ground and pound team. Anyway, we'll move on.
You know what? We'll move on. We'll talk about that later. Let's go to David Johnson, who switched teams, a much ballyhooed trade between the Cardinals and maybe Bill O'Brien got his guy. We don't know, but David Johnson looked really bad in spots in 2019. I can see the video right now of him trying to run off tackle, and it just looked horrible. We didn't know if it was slow motion. I had to go back, and it was game speed. Yeah. So David Johnson, is he left for dead? Is he can we really bank on just that receiving upside and maybe he splits with Duke Johnson, maybe he gets involved? David Johnson as an RB2. Are we good on that, or what do you think, Steve?
I'm a little scared of David Johnson. Not that I wouldn't take him as a running back too, but look, he was even in weeks 1 through 6 when he got the bulk of his work in Arizona last year before he fell off the face of the map. He still never had more than 18 rushing attempts, but he was running back 6 through those weeks because he's had 30 receptions during that time. Now he's coming over to Houston, where, like you said, he didn't look like himself last year. Maybe it's wear and tear, 28, age is catching up with him a little bit, but if he doesn't get those receptions, I really worry what his value is going to be. And with Duke Johnson being a very good receiving back, I don't know if he's going to be as effective, where he is going to be required to get a lot of his fantasy production from rushing the ball. Now, Bill O'Brien, I think, is going to give him every opportunity because he's going to need to justify getting rid of DeAndre Hopkins to bring him in. So I think he's going to get the opportunity. I just don't know if with that offensive line, with Duke Johnson there to steal some in the receiving game, if he's going to be able to produce enough in the rushing game to make it worthwhile. So I may take him, but I think he's one of the riskiest guys in this group here.
Yeah, what about you, Gary? What do you think? You think he can eclipse at least Carlos Hyde, who they gave 255 touches to last year?
If I can get him as an RB3, I'm more than happy for it. I won't touch him as an RB2. He's just, I will jump to a tier below, even if I had him there, just because I want the upside of someone else. My concern is that, I hate Bill O'Brien with fiery passion, and with Lamar, we thought that he was going to maybe get some of the passing work. He really didn't. They gave it to Alfred Blue or whoever else. Then with Hyde, they had Duke Johnson. And then now with David Johnson, they also have Duke. And it's going to confuse the hell out of people while they're watching it, not trying to figure out which Johnson, D. Johnson, just got them a touchdown or something. I don't think he'll get the targets. I really don't. I think it was overblown what happened with him last season, solely because I think there was his back injury. And I cannot imagine, I'm 34, and if my back hurts, it sucks to go to the bathroom, let alone try and run through an offensive line and have a bunch of giant dudes way bigger than me try and tackle me. So if he's healthy and whatnot, which there's nothing to indicate he's not, I think he'll be good. I think if you can get him as an RB3, he returns some value. If you get him as an RB2, you're going to be disappointed. He's just somebody that, if you're probably sticking him in your flex, regardless of how many other positions you have, you probably I got him, I'll put him in my flex and see what happens. But that offense as a whole is, I don't know, they're just concerning. I just don't really get it. Texans just shot themselves in the foot because Bill O'Brien's a fucking tool.
And there's your TED Talk for the evening. So David Johnson, let's just the opportunity is there. We can say all we want about David Johnson looking washed and everything, but he's going to get the opportunity, out in the receiving game, and he's going to get, most of the carries, I would certainly say, because, Duke Johnson's not that type of back. So it's all health dependent, and we'll see how he is. But, it's not a bad pay. I'd be happy with him as my RB3 just based on the fact that I know he's going to get at least, I'd say, 255 touches.
Yeah.
I'd say that's pretty much a lock. If Carlos Hyde had very little receiving work, if he can at least maybe get 50 targets, we'll see. But yeah, I'm in on the opportunity, but still scared about the injury, his injury history, especially last year. So
the one last thing that I'll add on him is, out of the top, say, 30 running backs, I don't know if there's a running back whose draft value will depend on how he looks in preseason and training camp more than David Johnson. I think you could see if he looks like the David Johnson of, say, 2017 and 18, at least physically, I can see him jumping up to maybe, that top 15 running back. I can see that. if he looks still kind of bad like he did last year, I can see him dropping another, 5 to 10 spots in the rankings as well. So I think it's definitely going to be important to see how he looks in preseason games.
Yeah, definitely. I'm with you on that. It's very fluid for David Johnson, at least right now, and we'll see what shakes out with that. Another running back who switched teams was Melvin Gordon, who is now with the Broncos and gets to share backfield with Philip Lindsay, and still got Royce Freeman there. So Gary, I'll go to you first. To sell you on Melvin Gordon, now that's going to be tough for me because I still think that him going to Denver was kind of a square peg in a round hole. They're just I don't know if Philip Lindsay is ever going to be pushed away. That dude, I love him, at least as a value in fantasy, just because the guy, he's an overachiever. He's rushed for 1,000 yards the last 2 seasons. I don't think he's just going to be a satellite back in that offense, with everything going on, all the receiving work. I think Philip Lindsay's going to be, I think he's still going to be a factor. Steve, how do you think that backfield shakes out in 2020? You see a 3-down role for Gordon, or do you think it's going to be more of a split than people realize?
Well, let me try to sell you guys on Melvin Gordon. And I am not necessarily the biggest Melvin Gordon fan in history. He's a volume guy. He always is. And that's not always my favorite guy to pick, but I think the volume is going to be there for him for a couple different reasons. First, I know I mentioned it with a couple other guys, but let's talk about Pat Shurmur as their offensive coordinator. Whenever a team has a defensive head coach like Vic Fangio, I always take a look at the offensive coordinator. So he's had 11 years as offensive coordinator or head coach. 7 of those years, his number 1 running back finished in the top 12. In 10 of those 11 years, they finished in the top 18. The only year they did not was 2011 in Cleveland, when they had the Colt McCoy, Peyton Hillis, Montario Hardesty dynasty, maybe we should say, because they were so good. So his number 1 running backs have a history of production. Last season, Denver only had let me just see here. Oh, sorry, I just lost it right here. They only had 11 team rushing touchdowns. I think they brought Gordon in because they know that they need to increase their rushing touchdown, make their running game a lot more viable. So I think they brought him in as a guy that is going to be their lead back. I don't think they would have done it if they were necessarily sold on Lindsay or Royce Freeman. I think they're going to give him the goal line touches because they want to see their rushing touchdowns increase a little bit. And with Pat Shurmur's history, I think he'll get the volume to produce. I would be very comfortable with Melvin Gordon as my number 2 running back.
Yeah, I took him as my RB2 in one of the Scott Fish mock drafts, and I wasn't too enthused about it, but as far as a guy that should get a good amount of volume, that's pretty much all you want, because I'm pretty sure I started quarterback, receiver, and then just hammered running backs. So in that case, yeah, I'm fully in on Melvin Gordon, at least in that format. If we're talking about redraft, I mean, he's gonna be going in that 4th, maybe end of the 3rd, 4th, maybe beginning of the 5th range, where it's not palatable for me, but I'd rather certainly have him over a bunch of other guys like James Conner or Jonathan Taylor, even, or Le'Veon Bell. So yeah, do we do anything to at least spark some thinking, Gary?
Nope. He's one of those guys I'm happy to be wrong on. His yards per carry has always been absolutely terrible. It's been like just above 4, even below that. Actually, I think it was in the 3s for most of his career. And yeah, I mean, I want to say like he's good at getting touchdowns, but last year he was terrible at it. And I don't know. The offense, I thought it was a weird signing. I didn't really get it at all. I like what they did. I mean, he was signed pre-draft, and then like after the draft, it happens, and you're just like, So why don't you just run with Phillip Lindsay and Royce Freeman? Like, you have this stacked offense right now. Like, maybe give your running backs a little bit of a chance and see what that offensive line can do. But
he did get 8 touchdowns last year, 8 rushing touchdowns, I guess I should say. 9 if you count the receiving touchdown as well.
Do you know how many red zone attempts he had? Because maybe I'm thinking of that. And that
I do not know.
That his percentage was quite low.
Oh, it very well could be. It could be, but he's averaged about 9 touchdowns a game, rushing touchdowns a game over the last 4 years. So, but I agree, his yards per carry has been horrible. I just think that the volume is going to be there, and I do like the coaching scheme, and so to me, he has a little bit of risk, but I still think he's got a safer floor than some of the other guys in this thing. Kind of like Carson, we like his floor. To me, I like Gordon's floor. I don't know if he necessarily has the upside to be that top, 5 to 8 back like he was at one point, but I do think that his floor, he's being drafted closer to his floor right now than anything.
Yeah. I get that completely. Now, Steve might have to sell me a bit on this next guy, being a Detroit Lions fan. I'm going to skip a little bit down to the rankings to DeAndre Swift. Now, I don't believe I don't have him in my top 24, but Steve does, and so does Gary. So I'm going to give the floor to Steve right now and sell me on Swift, coming from the resident Lions fan here.
Okay. Well, first I would say that I've played in Devy leagues for probably, 5 years now. I remember drafting Bo Scarborough, another Lion, back when he was a freshman, because he was a highly touted recruit out of high school going to Alabama, and Alabama only takes good running backs. So that's how long I've been playing Devy leagues. In the last year or two, DeAndre Swift was always one of the top guys, if not the top guy. He was at least for me, the number one Devy running back going into 2019.
Yep.
So if you look at it, he's got great skills. He can catch the ball. He's a good runner. He's going to a team in the Lions who, even though they have Kerryon Johnson, Matt Patricia has showed his hand in the draft that he wants to kind of take things old school in Detroit. He wants to run the ball, and he wants to stop the run. As much as I hate it as a Lions fan, I mean, he drafted 2 guards. He drafted a lot of special teams, and he drafted 2 defensive tackles in the draft this year. So Kerryon Johnson can't necessarily stay healthy. What was hard for me is you guys both have Jonathan Taylor ahead of him, and understandably so. Jonathan Taylor is a stud, and I've been really struggling which one that I want to put higher. So I weighed a bunch of pros and cons. So I'm going to ask you guys a few different questions here, and I didn't give these all to Swift. So first, a couple different questions. Who do you think is the better pure runner, not receiver, better pure runner, Swift or Taylor?
Taylor.
I'd probably go Taylor.
Okay, I gave it Taylor too. Who's the better receiver?
Swift.
Okay, who has less competition for touches, Swift or Taylor?
They're almost.
Who do you think will get more touches? I guess I should say. Who do you think
will get more? I think
Taylor.
Taylor gets more. I think that Swift has less competition. I think Taylor will get more.
I think Taylor, as far as I liken that almost, obviously without the draft capital, but like the Adrian Peterson, Chester Taylor, when Peterson was a freshman, Chester Taylor was coming off, I believe, a 1,200-yard season, and I believe it was like a 200 to 175 kind of split between those two. That's kind of where I am as far as Taylor goes, or Taylor and Mac. Sorry, it's that kind of a side there, but
yeah. No, it makes sense.
Okay. You see, I have Swift there because I have an injury-prone Kerryon Johnson, but then you got Marlon Mack, who's done really well the last 2 years, and Nyheim Hines, who, if I'm not mistaken, you like a lot for touches as well, for receptions as well, Kevin. So I have Swift with more likely to have more touches. you know, you have the fumble issues that Taylor has had, and Taylor has the better offensive line. I don't think I have to even ask that question if you guys think Indianapolis has a better offensive line than Detroit, because it doesn't. But to me, this just shows how close it is. And so being I look at PPR, I think the receptions as well as the less competition for touches, to me, puts DeAndre Swift slightly ahead of Jonathan Taylor in PPR leagues. So that's the reason that I like him so much, with a head coach that wants to run the ball, compared to, not that they don't want to run the ball in Indianapolis, because they drafted Taylor pretty high, but they drafted Michael Pittman even higher, and they brought in Phillip Rivers. So I think that they're still going to throw the ball a lot, if not more, this season as well. So that's my case on DeAndre Swift. Close call. I have him one spot apart, but the reason I put Swift slightly ahead of Taylor.
And I'll just say this too. What does it say about Kerryon Johnson when the dude's 22, going to be going 23, and you're drafting a second round back ahead of him 2 years later? I mean, that pretty much kind of be the writing on the wall, at least for him, being any sort of focal point in that offense. He's still going to get work, but I mean, what a difference last year to this year makes as far as a guy just dropping off I don't know if he's going to drop off the face of the earth, but I mean, if you're looking at it like in a dynasty point of view, certainly.
Yeah, Kerryon Johnson, you know, he hasn't been a bad producer, though. That's the problem. It's just been health. The guy just can't stay healthy. And so it'll be interesting to see how they use them. They have to me, they got two good running backs. They got Hawkinson and they got Jesse James. And then they have, you know, Marvin Jones and Kenny Golladay, and then Amendola. So I'm interested to see, you know, what kind of sets they run. Are they going to run two backs in one tight end with two receivers? Are they going to run, you know, one tight end, two backs, one tight end, and, you know, two receivers? Are they going to do three receiver sets with Amendola out there? I'm interested to see how this team is going to look this year. I really don't know the answer to that. I wish I could tell you that, you know, they're going to see a lot of, say, 21 personnel or 12 personnel or 11 personnel, but I really have no clue what the hell they're going to do this year. I can just guarantee that Swift is going to get more touches, a lot more touches than Kerryon Johnson.
Yeah, that's certainly fair with him. So we got to Gary's guy, we got to Steve's guy. I'm going to talk a little bit about Kareem Hunt. Now, I will say just off the top that he is not in my top 24, but I don't think Kareem Hunt can be really understated, because I'm going to start thinking about this a little more about Kareem Hunt and where I value him. Keep in mind with Nick Chubb, who's going in the beginning of the second round, when Kareem Hunt came back weeks 10 through 17, Chubb was RB15, Kareem Hunt was RB17, and Hunt scored him in PPR 6 out of those 8 games from weeks 10 to 17, and you're getting Kareem Hunt 3 to 4 rounds later. For me, with the amount of just the skill set of Kareem Hunt, I just think that that's one of the best values that you can get in fantasy. I'll go to Gary on this. Where do you stand on Kareem Hunt?
I mean, you kind of said all the same points I would be saying, and ultimately it just comes down to, I mean, we've all watched him play. We saw him explode with Andy Reid, and for anybody to doubt his talent, they weren't seeing what he did with the Browns. The Browns' offense wasn't too amazing last year. They did come on stronger towards the end of the year, and maybe Hunt's a part of that. I don't know. But RB17 over that back half, and like you said, the 3 to 4 rounds, I'm more than happy to always take that. I am actually comfortable with him being an RB2. I would love to have him as an RB3. He just has a soft spot in my heart until he did some knucklehead stuff, but he was my guy for a year for a couple different leagues and weird narrative stuff that happened. But I'm just happy to see that he got a good landing spot again, even if he has questionable decision-making off the field.
And he's one of those guys, too, if you're playing in a home league with your buddies, that's a guy you could probably get another round or two after, because they would be likely scared off of the fact that he's not the main guy. Chubb is. Those guys probably taking Chubb at the back half of the first round. That's a great guy. You can get your home league at a value, even more of a value than he is right now. What about you, Steve?
I'm just kind of interested to see the usage this year now that they brought on Hooper, because the first half of the season before Hunt played, they only ran 2 snaps with 2 backs in the backfield. After he came back, they ran 28% of their plays with 2 back sets. So now that they have Hooper to go along with Njoku, we pretty much know that after Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry, I don't think the receivers scare anyone. So are they going to run more 12 personnel, or are they going to run more 21 personnel? It definitely is interesting with Kevin Stefanski coming in and replacing Kitchens. And I guess I'd have to take a look at their usage as well. But to me, it seems like he ran a lot more 1-back sets there the last year in Minnesota. He's touted as a really good leader, but I don't know how much with the Vikings step forward last year offensively was due to Gary Kubiak being brought in, or whether it was to Stefanski being the offensive coordinator. So, the coaching situation to me is up in the air, and how they're going to change the usage of the players there. So to me, with him only getting roughly 5 rushing attempts per game in 5 receptions per game, it scares me a little bit. The production was there. He's very talented. I just am still curious as to what they're going to do with Njoku and Hooper and Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, and how they're going to use those 4 in certain personnel. So I'm not as high on Hunt as some people. It sounds like as high as Gary, but definitely the upside is there, and you can get him at a value. I think even at the value that he's at, I think it will be a good value to draft him at. I just maybe am not as high as him as Gary is.
They would be batshit crazy to not run 21. I mean, if they could have Chubb and Hunt on the field and have Hooper as the upgrade over Njoku, and Njoku hasn't been bad, but I mean, he's definitely not lived up to his draft capital. That offense looks like it's primed. One of my biggest things that I really like about him is twofold. One, I expect them to run a lot under Stefanski, especially for the first half of the season, and I think that Hunt will be a part of that. And then I also think that Hunt, if he's a 1A, 1B, but if something happens to Chubb, Hunt is probably a top 5 running back. He would be so damn good. So he has that safety net built in. I'm not going to take Chubb and Hunt. I mean, you could. I just don't like spending that much on one backfield that early. But the sky's the limit for him, as we've seen before. And so, yeah, I am finding myself going for him more and more.
Yeah, especially with those. If I'm going RB and I'm taking receivers, usually I'll find Kareem Hunt. Maybe if I'm feeling better about receivers in the 7th, and I can snag a Kareem Hunt over the guys in that ilk of the Sony Michels, and that I'm good on those guys. But yeah, I'd rather have a Kareem Hunt where I know he's got a great standalone value. Plus, like you said, if something happens to Chubb, then there you go. Boom. You've got pretty much an RB1 waiting to happen right there. So, yeah, absolutely. I'm all about Kareem Hunt, especially at a great value in redraft. So let's go to a running back in the same division, a guy that's had a lot of trouble staying healthy, and that have drafted running backs the last 3 seasons, and that's in Pittsburgh, where we find James Conner. Now, we all know when he is healthy, he's an excellent back. We know his value right around a 4th round ADP. Even with those injuries, he's a good value in the 4th, but is it about time you think that those backs start to get worked in more and kind of cap the upside of Conner? I'll pose that to Steve.
I like, and here's it sounds a little cocky, I'll say, but I like to pride myself in knowing that I can draft a deep roster and don't have to rely on top. So I find myself drafting more guys based on their upside on a per game basis rather than if they're going to stay healthy, because I feel like I'm confident enough in my own abilities that if he does get hurt, I can find a replacement for him, whether I got it in the draft or whether I draft, his handcuff, which I'm going to say is Benny Snell right now, which all indications are, or just, play wide receivers. So if for that fact, I love drafting James Conner. I mean, last year he only played 10 games, but on a per game basis, he was running back 18. And I think that's the absolute floor with him on a per game basis. With Ben Roethlisberger back the year before, he was running back 7 on a per game basis, running back 6 overall. So I think that offense is going to click again under Roethlisberger. It's a contract year for him. So I think he's going to be every effort to stay on the field as he can. We all know with contracts, whether he's going to stay in Pittsburgh or go somewhere else, which it looks like he might. For those reasons, he's one of my favorite backs in this range right here to target.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Gary?
Yeah, it ultimately just comes down to if you believe he's going to stay on the field or if he doesn't. I mean, if he stays on the field for 16, he is going to probably surpass everybody in this group, especially with Roethlisberger back and whatnot. I always just kind of default to, I don't know what the over-under on games played is. Let's just say he plays 12 games. Do I want 12 games of Connor or do I want 16 of Hunt, just to use Hunt since we just discussed him? And those extra 4 games make a pretty big difference. But when Connor plays, God, he's so flipping lights out. He's awesome. If I'm not a GM, I'm not Mike Tomlin, obviously. And at some point, don't you have to say, like, hey, let's give him 12 to 15 touches, not, 18 to 22 touches, and try and save him a little bit now that we have McFarland, we have Benny Snell, we have Jalen Samuels, we have all these other offensive weapons. Let's see what we can do, because they are a playoff team. I fully believe it. I actually think that they are probably one of the best teams in the AFC, and you want to do everything you can. So fantasy be damned if they can try and get themselves somewhere close to a Super Bowl in Roth's last couple of years.
It's he'll see some light boxes too with Roethlisberger as long as he's healthy and throwing the ball. And Ian Connor's been pretty good out of the receiving game too. So certainly something to look at. Hopefully Connor can stay healthy, but they've put a lot of capital in the running back position the last few years. So this could be it might be his last shot in Pittsburgh as far as retaining that RB1 job. And if not, then we'll see what happens with that, because, we've got McFarland, you've got Samuels there to catch passes too. You got Benny Snell. We'll see how that shakes out. Now, Adam Gase's most hated player, Le'Veon Bell. We know the volume's there. He's going to get 300 touches. He's going to be solid out of the backfield, catching balls down 37-3. But are you comfortable with him as your RB2, Steve?
Nope. I hate Le'Veon Bell. I just think he was a process of the product of the system. Jeez, I can't talk. I need to have another drink, I think. In Pittsburgh, I really do. And so he's old. He's got a lot of wear and tear. They brought in the Michael P. Ryan and Frank Gore, which neither in themselves are going to get a ton of carries, but I think enough to make that volume from the 245 carries that Le'Veon Bell got last year go down. The dude averaged 3.2 yards per carry. Adam Gase, I don't have faith in him as a coach. I don't have faith in Le'Veon Bell as a player. I think he'll still get enough receptions to be fantasy worthy. But I think compared to where he's getting drafted, I will probably have him on virtually 0 rosters this year.
It's about where I'm at. What about you, Gary?
I was going to say I'm going to let you respond because you have him at 24. I'm not touching him. Even if it was a different coach, I don't even know if I'm touching him.
He's really just a volume play for me.
Mm-hmm.
They put some capital in the offensive line, so maybe there's a glimmer of hope. But with that amount of volume, you know, he could fall into some back end RB2 value. So that's where I'm at. A lot of those guys around in that ilk are in timeshares, or there's even bigger questions. Le'Veon Bell, if he's healthy, he's getting the work. So it's pretty much the David Montgomery kind of back, but I'm taking him every time over Bell, just based on, you know, his second year, that offense basically running him ragged. I'm pretty much I don't know if I'm going to be able to get a lot of shares of Bell, just because I'd rather have the value at receiver versus an RB3 fringe guy like Bell. But, you know, the volume's going to play. I'll just say that. Well, he's not a focal point of your team. So, you know, that's where I'm at with him. But, and there's one more guy I really want to talk about too. He's not in our top 24s. It's Mark Ingram. And he does have the high touchdown upside. He's got in his rearview mirror, he's got J.K. Dobbins. But as an RB3, I can think of a lot worse players to stick back there, maybe as a flex. Is this his backfield for now? I'll ask Gary first.
Yeah, I think it's his backfield for now. I actually am almost comfortable with him as an RB2, but knowing you can get him as an RB3, it's crazy how late that he's going. He's like going like before Damian Williams sometimes in drafts. I'm like, it's way too close to each other. I think that the best way I've heard about it is, you know, if you can think of Dobbins as between the 20s and Ingram as being in the red zone, which, like, I'll take that on a high-powered offense. He should have some pretty strong touchdown upside. Ultimately, he's faded out of most people's top 24. I had him until I reevaluated and thought, no, if I'm going to go with split backfields, I'm not going to go with Ingram, who just brought in Dobbins. I'd rather go with the flip side and get some of the younger guys and put them in there. And I mean, kind of also begs the question, like, why aren't Ingram and Dobbins going like back to back, with the fact that like Dobbins could very, very, very easily, if not likely, surpass Ingram already this year, and yet they're being drafted pretty far apart from each other, it seems like.
Yeah, they're going about maybe another round and a half of separation between Ingram and Dobbins. What about you, Steve?
I agree. I mean, Ingram last year had 202 rushing attempts. What kind of surprised me, I didn't realize it was that high, but Gus Edwards had 133. And so I can see Dobbins jumping in, and it'll be Ingrams and Dobbins instead of Ingrams and Edwards. I can see the receptions being a little bit more, say, I wouldn't be surprised if it was 50-50, to be honest. If they both met in that 170 range, 160 to 180 range, if they were both in there. But Ingram, I think he'll be, you know, kind of he had 26 receptions last year. I can see him filling in for that third down receiving back, and I can see him getting an increase in receptions this year. So I think Ingram still has value. I have him in my top 30. He couldn't quite make my top 24, but he's in my top 30. So he's a high-end running back 3 in my system. And while I think this will probably be his last main year for fantasy relevance, I think he'll still be a very serviceable running back 3 for your fantasy team.
Doesn't it feel like Ingram does this every year? Even when he was like the number 2 to AK, and before then when it was Ingram, like he just had these weird years where he finishes a top 10 back, and yet you would never even think about it. And last year, what did he finish last year? Like 12, 13, I think. So
yeah, he was running back 11 last year, 11, in 15 games. So with the Gus thing is kind of weird, because they would put him in during blowouts and they would just run the hell out of him.
Yeah, they would.
My concern about Ingram's reception total, which is kind of counter to what I just said about how high I kind of do like him and don't like him, is, you know, like at what point are they going to have Justice Hill being the receiving back? And they do like Edwards still, like you said. I mean, his role will significantly diminish, but and I think, why not have Dobbins be the passing back actually, and having Ingram be the guy that's taking the punishment because he's 30 years old, and just let him ride off into the sunset, ground and pound, and then have Dobbins do whatever he can to supplement that. I feel like everything I said just kind of contradicted itself, but I don't know. I want to have a piece of one of those two, and ultimately I'm probably just going to defer to whoever's going latest at the time that I'm ready to take another running back.
So well, either way, I like it because Baltimore, their offensive line, PFF had them ranked second. Their offensive line ranked second after last season, and you got that Lamar Jackson threat that just keeps that defense spread out to try to contain them. So regardless of their offensive line, I think whatever back is going to be productive back there. But yeah, I see your point about just running the heck out of Ingram. I do think that most head coaches are hesitant to put their rookie running backs in for pass protection until they can prove themselves. So that's why I think Ingram might have the edge on those third down receiving situations, just because of his, he's a vet, he knows what to do. But yeah, either way, I think they're both going to be really good running backs this season.
I'll ask this to both of you before we start to wrap up here about J.K. Dobbins. So is there any point in the 2020 season where you see Dobbins take over that backfield as far as over 50% of the carries in that offense? And I'll ask Steve first. You think he may be mid-season, late season? What do you think?
I don't think it will happen. I mean, I think they'll be close to 50%, but I don't think he will assume a bell cow role unless Ingram gets hurt. I think it'll be a pretty even split throughout the course of the season, unless there's an injury to Ingram.
I think if he comes out and he's Zeke, which, he's been comped to a lot, and if he's Zeke, then John Harbaugh is just such a good coach. That organization is such a good organization. They would not limit keeping their best guys off the field if whatever they needed to do. I mean, they obviously made the Lamar Jackson switch, even though it took them a few games to finally do it. I definitely can see it happening. I think it's unlikely just because it's not as if Ingram is some schlub. Like, he's still a good running back. So
yeah, absolutely. Now we've pretty much talked about a lot of the RB2s, maybe a few of the RB3, candidates there. So later on in drafts for redraft, and I'll ask Steve this first. Who are a couple backs going later after you filled out your starting lineup that you want to at least get a share of, on your bench, or maybe they can fill a kind of a flex spot role? Who are a couple names, Steve?
Well, this guy's probably average draft position's a little bit too high for that. But one guy that I'm extremely high on is James White. I think with Tom Brady gone, with Edelman being the main threat in the passing game, I think they're going to lean heavily on him and Sony Michel this year. So I'm very high on James White this season. But he's kind of more of that running back 3/4. So if you're looking at some later guys, Boston Scott in Philadelphia, they really don't have much depth there in Philadelphia beyond Miles Sanders. It looks like he's going to be the number 2. And Doug Peterson, he likes to spread the ball around with his running backs a little bit. His history, yes, Miles Sanders, the second half of last season, did carry a huge load. But history, Doug Peterson's running back ones, the last 4 seasons in Philly, running back 15, running back 43, running back 44, running back 26. I think Boston Scott will get some play, even with Miles Sanders there. In a late round, I mentioned him briefly earlier, but Benny Snell. Mike Tomlin has indicated that it looks like Anthony McFarland might be that change of pace back if anything happens to James Conner, and he's given kind of the sign of approval for Benny Snell. So, if you do count on James Conner missing a few games, or several, quite a few games, I think Benny Snell will be that guy that, while he might not have much value with Conner healthy, I think he's one of the a good handcuff to own, and he can be had at ADP running back 79. So you can get him in the last round of your draft, regardless of whether you have Conner, and then just kind of hope Conner gets hurt.
Yeah,
I was surprised that you didn't have Damian Harris if you're going to have James White. News just came out that Sonny Michel still has a knee issue. I think he had another scope done, and it's not. I mean, he's had repeated knee issues. They drafted Damian Harris a little bit higher than most people expected since they spent a first-round pick on Sonny Michel. I'm going to go with James White, which I think is actually a great pick because he's just like a solid PPR floor guy, which, Kevin has another one of those. I think Damian Harris actually has the chance to just take over that backfield and be kind of their backfield moving forward. And just it's another swing and a miss for a first-round pick by the Patriots. So something.
Well, Kevin didn't tell me I could pick 100 guys, Gary. I had to pick just a couple. Jesus. I'm just teasing.
Well, Gary, who are some of your guys? Who do you like in that back end of drafts?
So I got two. Oh, I have three, but I'll let you talk about the middle one. Obviously, Jerick McKinnon, I referenced him earlier. He's just going super late. Hell yeah, I'm going to try and take the RB2/3 for the Niners. Awesome offense. And a guy that they paid a crazy contract, even though it sucked that he tore his ACL. He hasn't really ever had time to even play with the Niners, but he's back to full strength. Seems to be going pretty well. And then rookie Antonio Gibson, he was taken by the Redskins. I don't agree with it, but he has been comp saying like he's going to be Rivera's new Christian McCaffrey. I mean, obviously Geis is there. Adrian Peter. I mean, shit, they have like 9 running backs, it feels like.
And host of Peyton Barber.
Yeah, they got a whole bunch. But ultimately, Geis, we'll still see what happens with his knee. And if he can hold up, Adrian Peterson's going on 34 or going on 35. And Gibson could just be a lightning rod for that offense. And, we've seen the Skins under a different coaching scheme, but have like Chris Thompson, who was great out of the backfield and have really good success. And if Gibson is able to establish that role and kind of just be that kind of gadget player, you never know what could happen. And he's going super duper late. So definitely worth a flyer just to see what happens. He's one of those guys that I like, if for some reason nothing happens in the first 2 weeks, like you can cut him because maybe he's just going to be this bit player with nothing, or all of a sudden, like you've just hit gold.
I just want to say this to kind of echo that. He ran 80% of his plays at wide receiver in college. And so with the lack of wide receiver depth that they have behind Terry McLaurin, I can see him being on the field with Geis or Adrian Peterson a lot in that receiving role. So if you're in a PPR league, I can easily see them have Geis or Adrian Peterson on the field, with Gibson on the field as well, a lot.
Totally.
He might be a big waiver claim in week 1. I'll say that.
Yep.
Yeah, watching that. So I've got 3 guys. Gary deferred one of them to me, and I'll talk about him now. It's Zach Moss. The Majuk girls are loving this because I'm on the bet. I get it now. I get Zach Moss. It's a guy he's gonna be like a Frank Gore. He's gonna get those inside the 20 carries for Buffalo. I just think he's a better overall player than Devin Singletary will be. Singletary should get between the 20s, and then Zach Moss, anything after that, I think he's got a chance to get a stranglehold on that backfield. It might not fully be realized in 2020, but if something happens to Singletary, then boom, in that run offense, Zach Moss has an absolute great shot at returning at least maybe running back 2 value. A couple guys too, Darrington Evans from Tennessee. I could see the Titans, their efficiency go down, maybe being in more negative game scripts. So Henry is likely not going to see the field, and they're not going to, I can't see Dalen Dawkins or Blazin Game being out there. They drafted Darrington Evans, and I think he's going to be a factor. Maybe not as much as a Deion Lewis was in Tennessee years prior, but I think Evans has a chance to at least carve out a role in that offense outside of Henry. And then the mayor of Checkdown City, Nyheim Hines, is a guy that I am all over. That's my nickname. I'm gonna make that stick, damn it. But we saw what Rivers did with Eckler last year, and maybe not to that type of upside, but he could easily get 65, 70 catches in that offense, you know, as just a Rivers dump off. You know, even outside of, you got Taylor and Mack there, but I think Hines certainly has a role. And if, you know, something happens with, you know, Paris Campbell in the slot, they'll need some other guys outside of, you know, their receivers. And I think Hines can be that kind of safety valve for Rivers, who might be kind of on the downswing. So he's a guy that I'm able to get in the last quarter of the draft that, you know, I'll take him every time and feel so great about at least having a guy that has 65, 70 catch upside in PPR.
Yeah, the one thing I worry about Hines is that he's just going to be waiver wire fodder that you're just going to constantly be like, oh, I should pick him up, and then I'm never going to start him, so I'm going to drop him from someone else, which I think is a good guy to have. But the Austin Eckler thing, which is something I've kind of always made that comp to, and I'm just thinking through it, and we have seen Hines try to get 10 plus carries plus his catches, and he's never had anywhere close to the success that Eckler had. I get the same idea, but I think until Mack or Taylor are one's gone, it's going to be Mack. Until Mack's gone, I think Hines is going to be a little bit capped. And I say that as somebody that has literally drafted him in every draft I've done so far this offseason. So I like the pick, but I think I'm starting to get a little bit more hesitant about it, just because you personally posted about Mack potentially getting 175 touches, and all of a sudden the reality of that hit.
Okay, Kevin, do you want some good news?
I would love some.
All right. Just a few days ago, Pro Football Focus posted a really good article about check down quarterbacks. And they have it's based on the highest 2-year check down rates from 2018 and 2019. Phillip Rivers, fifth over that span, and check down percentage at 9.6 percentage points. So yes, the receivers are going to see a lot of check downs there. I'll just, for the heck of it, just say the ones that are above him. Blake Bortles, non-factor. Mason Rudolph, non-factor. Derek Carr, he was third over that span with 10.3 percentage. And then Gardner Minshew is fourth over that time with 10.1% check down percentage. So I think Leonard Fournette, Jacobs, along with whatever other running backs, are getting some check downs there. But Phillip Rivers does love to check that ball down a lot.
Yep, totally.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other guys?
I'll ask you, who is the lowest check down percentage over that time? Any guess?
Josh Allen.
You're right. You got it. 2.3%. Josh Allen was the lowest percentage of check down. So maybe not as many receptions for Devin Singletary and Zach Moss there in Buffalo.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other guys you want to talk about?
I think I'm good.
Yeah.
Another soliloquy about Raheem Mostert, Gary? Are you good?
That'll be coming later, man. We're going to start doing our fishbowl episodes. We're going to start doing our sleepers, and not sleepers, but our values and all that stuff coming up. So I'm sure I'll be ranting about them. I think Kenny Galladay and Raheem Mostert, I think those are my two guys this year.
You know, I do want to say, I do have one guy I want to mention real quickly, and I promise because we're already over, so I'll be really quick. But one guy that is just outside my top 24 that will likely make it in there sooner rather than later, Darius Geis. I love this guy. I still remember when Ryan and I did a podcast, had John Laubin, and he just loved Darius Geis as a pure runner, not necessarily a receiving back. But several people had him ranked higher than Saquon Barkley in that draft as far as just a pure runner, not fantasy saying that he should be drafted ahead of him or not in real football. But the guy can run if he can stay healthy. Here's an interesting stat as well. Last season, Washington was 31st in the NFL in rushing attempts, yet they were 11th in rushing yards. That tells me that they didn't run the ball much, but when they did, they were effective. So I think if he can stay healthy, he's a great runner in a system that I think is going to be good for him. And so I really am high on Darius Geis.
Yeah, I'm taking him in a lot of drafts because he's been slipping. A lot of people are scared off about the injury history, and you know, if he can stay healthy, he's got as much of a chance as anybody to return wide receiver or running back 2 upside or even more. You know, we'll certainly see, but you know, they could certainly use a running back. You know, Haskins can take anything he can get at this time to maybe help him out a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. So I think we've run through all these running backs, and I just want to thank you, Steve, for hopping on here on this Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting.
Well, I want to thank you guys for having me, and it's a nice little break from the family. I got to whisper that so they don't hear me, but we're still kind of on lockdown for the most part, so it's kind of nice to come and hide in the office for an hour or two and talk some football with some good friends. So thank you guys for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely, and happy to have you. You're always welcome. You got that standing invite,
sure.
So whenever you feel like coming on, let us know. You're in. We'll shuffle stuff around and.
Yeah,
it's always fun.
Now that I got my new computer, my old one crashed. I got a new computer. I'll be jumping on a lot. You guys are going to be sick of me before too long.
We got to figure out a way to do like a Scotfish roundtable with all the Fighting Chance folks, and also bring Ryan in. Just if once we figure out divisions and placements and stuff, because I know I'm pretty positive all of us are in it. So that'll be pretty fun.
My invite yet, so I cannot say that yet.
Shit, sorry, dude.
Steve, you're getting in. You're getting in. We'll get you in.
If not, I've been in it the last couple of years, and I've done pretty well, and I don't mind other people getting a shot either. So I live my life vicariously through you guys. I'm just glad you guys are in. If I get in, great. But if not, hey, someone else gets an opportunity to have a lot of fun and make a lot of connections.
Fair enough.
Absolutely. It's what it's all about, is making those connections and doing a lot of good for the community, certainly. But let's speaking of Scott Fish, so Gary, I'm going to defer to the champion, the Scott Fish Bowl 9 champion. Who are we having next Wednesday?
And we're bringing another champion. We're going to have Stompy in, and for once, we're going to have 2 Scott Fish Bowl winners. So Scott Fish 8, Scott Fish 9. We don't know actually the time we'll be tweeting that stuff out, but we'll be talking about all things Scott Fish as much as we can, at least. And it'll be awesome for once to hear someone else talk about it rather than myself talk about it, and kind of just go from there. I think it'll be fun. And we'll probably have some other Scott Fish Bowl related guests sometime here in the next couple of weeks. We're just getting some of that stuff locked down. But you'll see us tweeting all about it from our at FC Live Pod on Twitter.
And I just want to say this. I met Stompy in person at the King's Classic last year, and that dude is just a great, larger-than-life personality. He is a fun guy. He's a must-follow on Twitter, although I'm sure he's probably he pisses a lot of people off on Twitter. Not myself. I love the dude, but if you're going to tune in for a fun show, Stompy will bring his A game. I guarantee you that.
Yeah, we're dubbing that 2 champions, 1 pod. So I'm going to just have to sit back and moderate this thing.
2 champs, 1 cup.
There you go.
Oh, that reminds me. I'm not even going to say it.
Yeah, we don't have to get it.
We don't want to authorize any just Google searches on that, so don't do that. But I
have nightmares about that. I still have nightmares.
Oh, we all do. I'm going to stop it right there.
Yeah, we're done.
And we're gonna pin
Steve,
on.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we got to put a pin on that one. Thank you, Steve. We really appreciate having you on here. And that has been Fighting Chance Live. Tune in next Wednesday. Like we said, we're gonna have Stompy on for 2 champions, 1 pod. I'll be moderating this big old stream of fun for Scott Fish Bowl and go into all that. So for Gary and Steve, I'm Kevin Tompkins. Again, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find that link through our link tree on the FC Live Pod Twitter account. We really, appreciate all the support that we've gotten over these episodes here. We've done, I believe, 6 streams and 3 podcasts. So that's 9 episodes in total. So again, thank you all for the support. It really means a lot. We've gotten a lot of really, really good feedback across the industry. So I'm really thankful for all that. I know Gary is too. And, as much as we can do, we want to do it. So again, for Gary, Steve, this has been Fighting Chance Live, and we'll see you next week.